It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the 4 films of November 10th, 2006. Now, on today's show, Will Ferrell stars in probably his most underrated movie he's ever made, and one that deserves a lot more attention than it has gotten since it came out. But we'll take a look at that. We'll also take a look at Sarah Michelle Gellar's second horror movie in 2006. We also have Ridley Scott's latest film, starring Russell Crowe and featuring a pre-Oscar winning Marion Cotillard. And also we have, finally, David Ayer's first film as a director, coming off the success of Training Day with Harsh Times. But before we get to those movies, of course, let's talk about what is easily the best movie of the whole weekend, one of the best movies of the year that you may have missed out on because it wasn't Will Ferrell French kissing Sacha Baron Cohen like Talladega Nights, or, it's not a movie where he's screaming at the top of his lungs and doing stupid stuff like in Step Brothers. No, it's Will Ferrell doing a really good movie that nobody really knows about. Most people don't know about, but that movie is, of course, Stranger Than Fiction. I should probably also point out that he's more than French kissing Sacha Baron Cohen in Talladega Nights, but that's not what I'm trying to get across here. What I'm trying to get across is this great movie that you probably have never even seen because it's not a stupid screwball slapstick comedy like Step Brothers or Talladega Nights is. But no, it's Will Ferrell actually doing something that's more than showing what he could do as his range as an actor. And in this movie, he plays an IRS agent who begins hearing a disembodied voice narrating his life as it happens, seemingly the text of a novel in which it is stated that he is the main character and he's going to die, and he frantically seeks to somehow prevent his death. He goes to somebody played by Dustin Hoffman. He falls in love with a restaurant owner played by Maggie Gyllenhaal. Emma Thompson is the voice that's narrating his life, and Queen Latifah is somebody who works for the company that she works for, the book company that she works for, and this movie is absolutely incredible. It's an amazing film. It's a good mix of comedy and drama, and it shows what Will Ferrell can do instead of just playing that guy we see, instead of playing a Ron Burgundy or a Buddy the Elf. Like, there are movies where that can work. There are movies where he can be really funny in that. Like a couple really good underrated movies from the year before. Bewitched, Kicking and Screaming. We'll get to a movie with him doing what he does best the following year with Blades of Glory. Yeah, there are times when that can work. There are times when that can be really funny, but there are times when, I want to see him do something more straightforward and restrained, and this movie is definitely that. This is probably one of his best overall films as a whole, and it helps you have a really good director in Mark Forster, who did Monsters Ball, a really good writer in Zach Helm, and just a strong cast for Ferrell to work around with. You're always going to get great performances from Dustin Hoffman and Emma Thompson. Queen Latifah is also really good in the movie. Maggie Gyllenhaal continuing to have a breakout 2006. I think, it's really funny because she hates Will Ferrell's character straight from the beginning of the movie. But then as they slowly but surely come together, and you really do buy into their relationship. You can buy into their chemistry, that these two would have a chemistry together. And I love the build-up that this movie is leaning towards. This movie really is, does a great job of building the storyline up, building the tension, building what's going to happen to this character Will Ferrell is playing. The last 15 minutes of the movie, I think, are absolutely pitch perfect because Will Ferrell finally gets to the point where he has to meet the narrator, and there's a great build up to how the narrator finds out that she's actually creating the world of this guy that actually exists, and the fact that Will Ferrell's willing to go with the idea of going to die, and and the way that the film ends itself is really well done. It's a perfectly put together film, and yet nobody went to go see it. And I think most people didn't go see it because, like I said, been saying again, it's because Will Ferrell wasn't doing anything too brash or too raunchy. The stuff that made his name in the past with Old School, Elf, Anchorman, Talladega Nights. Like, every time he tries to go do something a little bit different, more restrained, 9 times out of 10, it unfortunately doesn't perform well. But it's not because the guy isn't trying his best. I mean, this is a movie where it shows this guy has a ton of range. And we've talked about some movies with him where he's got range. Melinda and Melinda, the Woody Allen movie, I think is a very good example of that. He's going to be he'll do other movies down the road that show what this guy can do as an actor as a whole. And I think this movie is a perfect example of him branching out and trying to do something different outside of his norm. And like I said, most people turned away from it because it was more of it wasn't just a straightforward mainstream raunchy comedy. It's a thinking man's movie. You have to think about it as the movie goes along. You have to think, how is this guy going to get out of this? And, it's a restrained performance by Ferrell that I think a lot of people really needed to see, because this was at a time when Will Ferrell's star power was, not saying dying, but certainly was like, it wasn't in the same place it was after he had those two successful years in 2003 and 2004. And like films like Kicking and Screaming, Bewitched were not the biggest financial hits. Neither was this one. But those are movies that are actually really good. And of course, Talladega Nights is the big hit of that comedy hit of that summer, which, I mean, a lot of people like that movie. I'm so on it. But this to me is the best Will Ferrell movie he made in this particular year, and maybe one of his best overall films, no question about it. I think this is a very good movie with a lot of strong performances, a really good storyline. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's got a good mix of comedy and drama. I think it's a fantastic film, and one that definitely deserves a lot more attention than I think it gets. And I think it is slowly but surely building in the decades since it's come out, but I don't think it's quite there yet. I really hope this movie finds its following over time, because it is really a damn good movie that deserves a lot more credit and a lot more attention than it gets. I highly recommend this movie. If you have not seen Stranger in Fiction, you're doing yourself a major disservice, because you're missing out on one of the year's best films, no question about it. Definitely seek this movie out. It's incredible. Stranger Than Fiction. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, which is Sarah Michelle Gellar in The Return. Those movies that are trying so hard to rip off the actor's former work in The Grudge and failing miserably at it. There's no question about it. This is literally what they're trying to do over at Universal. I mean, I know it's Rogue Pictures, it's not technically Focus Features, but it's all under the Universal umbrella. But in this movie, Sarah Michelle Gellar plays a businesswoman haunted by memories of her childhood and the mysterious death of a young woman. And yeah, it's another one of those style over substance movies where at times the movie can look pretty good, visually very bleak and what it's trying to go for, but everything else about it is pretty lame. The whole psychological horror aspect of it is not that great. You got your predictable jump scares. You got your predictable story cliches that make no sense whatsoever in the context of the movie. And the film just is not a good film on any way, shape, or form. It was quickly forgotten almost immediately. First off, you don't release horror movies after Halloween. Like, very rarely does that ever work, unless you're making Bram Stoker's Dracula in 92 or Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 94, where those actually do become successes or actually good movies. But if you're doing this after Halloween, you just know that your film's already done with, and you're burying it under whatever big holiday release is coming out. So yeah, it's not much more to even say about this movie. It's a film that's so largely forgettable. I bet if you asked Sarah Michelle Gellar about this movie, she would tell you she doesn't even remember making it. I mean, that's how much it feels like this movie just felt like so vapor. It came, it went, it never made an impact with anybody, and was immediately forgotten, almost immediately. So yeah, not much more to say about that one. So let's go ahead and get back to some interesting films, starting with, actually, not really starting because we only got 2 more left. Moving on to the next, let me rephrase that. Moving on to our next film. How about that? Ridley Scott's latest film, and that is Russell Crowe starring in A Good Year. So after years of no contact with his Uncle Henry, played by Alwood Finney, a London banker and bond trader, played by Russell Crowe, learns that Henry has died in the state. It literally says INT state, INTSTATE. If you think I'm crazy, take a look at this. Intestate. So I wasn't reading that the wrong way. That's how it's literally spelled in the synopsis. So Max inherits a chateau and vineyard in Provence, and Max spends part of his childhood there learning maxims and how to win and lose, and honing his killer instinct at chess, as well as which serves him well in finance. Max goes to France intent on selling the property. He spends a few days there getting the property ready to show. Memories, a beautiful woman, played by Marion Cotillard, and a young American who says she's Henry's illegitimate daughter, interrupts his plans. Does Max the boy know things that Max the man has forgotten? I guess there's no better way to say what this movie is, what this movie essentially is, by saying, by God, it tried. it really did try to do something that was outside of the norm for Ridley Scott and Russell Crowe. Like, this is something that's completely outside of what you expect from these two people. And I'll give them credit for trying. I'll give them credit for doing something ambitious, but man, does it not work. It's a very sappy film. And yeah, I think Russell Crowe does have enough charm to would make this kind of work in general. And he does have a good chemistry with Marion Cotillard, which, good lord, she is beautiful in this movie, man. Like, that's the only reason I'd probably say watch this movie for Marion Cotillard, because, my god, she is beautiful in this movie, man. But everything else, yeah, this feels like a film that Ridley Scott should not be involved in. I feel like somebody else should have came in and directed this movie and probably would have had a much better success rate with it. But other than that, though, it's a very sappy film. It's not really that engaging. It's not really that funny in general. We've seen stories like this done to death so many times before, and it wastes a really good cast. You know, you got, like I said, Marion Cotillard, Albert Finney, Freddie Highmore is in the movie playing the younger Russell Crowe in this. Abby Cornish is in this movie where she's playing the daughter of Henry, and it's a film that I want to give it much more credit for. I want to give it much more praise for, but I just can't do it, man. It's a film that's trying way too hard and trying way too much to be anything but a sappy, cheesy, cliched, riddled romantic comedy, and it just fails on so many levels. And I expect better from the people involved in this movie. This isn't like Ridley Scott's movies that he makes nowadays, which are mostly which are mostly failures by just repeating the same stuff he's done before. Like, this is a failure where he's trying to be more ambitious and trying to do stuff that's outside of his range. And he's made that work in the past. I mean, Blade Runner was definitely something very different from Alien and The Warriors, of course. You know, a lot of movies back in the day were very different films than what we're used to him making. Like, he made a lot of genre movies. And this is one of those movies where it just feels like, yeah, this is probably a genre you should probably stay away from, because this is not really your MO, dude. And, yeah, it's just not a good movie overall. It's a film that has good ambitions to it. It's got a good heart to it, but it's not worth it. Even just to watch Marion Cotillard in the movie, it's not worth it, because you could just go online and watch those scenes in particular. But yeah, overall a disappointing film, but a noble effort. I got to give him credit for that. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to the last film that we have here, and I almost forgot it. Training Day writer David Ayer makes his directorial debut with Harsh Times. So in the movie, you have Jim Davis, who's an ex-Army Ranger who finds himself slipping back into his old life of petty crime after a job offer from the LAPD evaporates. His best friend is pressured by his girlfriend Sylvia to find a job, but Jim is more interested in hanging out and making cash from small heists, while trying to get a law enforcement job so he can carry his Mexican girlfriend. Jim Davis is played by Christian Bale. Freddie Rodriguez is his friend, and Ava Longoria, of course, is his wife to be. And it's a bit, and yeah, this very much is like Training Day, except nowhere near as good. As much as Christian Bale and Freddie Rodriguez and Ava Longoria are very good actors and they can carry a film, it's not enough to carry the load in this particular movie. And the film really struggles because it's trying way too hard to not be like Training Day, and yet it feels very much like Training Day as a whole. I think the next movie that Ayer makes as a director as a whole is a lot better, Street Kings, which is very different and much more and works much better as a whole. But this definitely feels like a movie that's trying to copy a trend from the writer and director of this movie that was in the last film he did, and it just didn't work as a whole. It's a film that's just okay, but nothing too spectacular. I think the performances are fine, but the story itself is not enough to carry the load as a whole, and it really falls apart real quickly. So yeah, that's a skip on Harsh Times. And so with all that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies, and we got a big week of movies coming up next time around with 6 movies, because next week we have George Miller's CG animated movie Happy Feet, which went on to win the Best Animated Feature Oscar the following year. Daniel Craig takes his part in the role of James Bond in the first film of the new James Bond era, Casino Royale. A Bob Odenkirk movie you probably have never even heard of from the guys who made Mr. Show, Let's Go to Prison. Richard Linklater has a new movie out on the ensemble Fast Food Nation. There's a new film from Christopher Guest for your consideration. And Emilio Estevez directs a film with a star-studded movie based on the life of the last days of Bobby Kennedy, Bobby. So we'll take a look at those 6 movies. That'll be coming up on tomorrow's show. So a really big show coming your way next time. So until then, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the place on the next page. Check out the previous episode. Also, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notification button so you get updates on when the videos come out, because we post every day. So with all that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time. And until then, as always, take care.